On July 10, 2010, Erik Scott, a 37-year-old man, was shot dead by gangbangers with badges. Since that tragedy, Erik's father, William Scott, has been seeking justice. This tragedy teaches many lessons, such as how the media controls the message, how law enforcement stonewalls to protect itself, and that ordinary citizens need to understand gun rights. 12 people were murdered in 2011 by LVMPD alone. The question we the people must ask are things like, is there really justice in our legal system? Is law enforcement needed? Could citizens be better served by privatizing security? Do law enforcers do more harm than good? It came as a punch to the gut to many seeking justice for Erik's murder when his father dropped the lawsuit against Metro. And for the first time since that decision, Mr. Scott explained on freedomizerradio.com what compelled him to drop the lawsuit. He also opened up to reveal inside information that mainstream media failed to report. I hope you enjoyed this excerpt of my interview with Bill Scott, the father of Erik Scott, only on Tiger Lily's Freedom Roar.
Today, new accounts are coming out about what really led up to the Saturday's deadly Costco shooting.
Police say the victim pointed a gun at them, but witnesses say he didn't. Now it'll be up to a coroner's inquest to decide. Calvert Collins is live outside the Costco with more on this developing story on this Tuesday. Good morning, Calvert.
Good morning, Dave and Dana. This Costco was just like any other, a busy shopping day on Saturday, but then, of course, as we know, things turned very violent. The victim in this case is 38-year-old medical salesman Erik Scott. He's a West Point graduate, had a master's degree from Duke, and was described by friends as a solid guy. But police say Scott was acting erratically in the store on Saturday, throwing merchandise on the floor. They said customers had complained about Scott's behavior, that he had argued with security and refused to cooperate with police when they arrived. Initial reports said Scott's girlfriend, who was with him at the time, told police he had a concealed weapon permit and not to shoot because he was a military officer and he was disarming. But police say the situation escalated quickly and that he didn't obey their commands.
I could clearly hear the officers giving commands to the individual to get him on the ground. You can hear people yelling and screaming in the background. You could hear the shots being fired. When you listen to that, it definitely sends a chill down your spine.
3 officers fired 7 shots, killing Scott. Witnesses in the store posted comments related to the incident on our website. One wrote, quote, "I was there and I never saw this guy do anything with his gun. The police started shooting immediately after 'drop it' was yelled," end quote. Metro says they have over a dozen witnesses as well as 911 tapes and surveillance video that will corroborate their accounts of what happened. Now, as for those 3 officers who fired those 7 shots that killed Erik Scott, they have been put on paid administrative leave and pending an internal investigation. And of course, then down the road, a coroner's inquest will be used to determine if that shooting was justified or not. Reporting live, Calvert Collins.
Thank you for joining us. The frustration mounts for the family of a man shot to death outside the Summerlin Costco this month.
And a lot of people in our community have questions about this, too. The DA's office is delaying the coroner's inquest into the police shooting indefinitely. We have no date to give you tonight. Gerard Romalo joins us live with the latest on this. And you've been talking with the Scott family and also a new witness who's come forward in this case.
Yeah, that's right, Jim. This new witness says he was actually evacuated from the Costco store that day and was about 10 to 15 feet away from Erik Scott when police fired those fatal shots.
Until now, Robert Garcia has remained silent. He, too, was at the Summerlin Costco the day a man who reportedly pulled a gun on police was shot to death. He says it happened literally feet from where he was standing, and now he can't erase the incident from his mind.
But I was close enough to see this guy's face and to see his hands and to see his body go down.
Police told News 3 that day Erik Scott drew a gun on officers, and that is when officers opened fire. Garcia says he remembers exiting the Costco about 10 feet in front of Scott and immediately noticing an officer with a gun drawn, that the officer yelled, "Put it down, get down," and 4 shots were fired.
Boom, boom, boom. boom.
He says he instantly turned toward the victim.
After hearing the shots, I see the guy going down. I looked at it, I saw his hands. His hands had no gun in it. I looked on the ground because I just did that. I looked down and I didn't see a gun. I saw what I thought were maybe sunglasses and a pen.
Police, meantime, have been reluctant to release any information about the investigation until the coroner's inquest, which has now been delayed indefinitely. Scott's family members, who this weekend began advertising on billboards for more witnesses, are frustrated by the delay, calling it nothing more than a stall tactic.
It appears to me that they don't have much of a case, so they're trying to build one now. And obviously they're going to try to do everything they can to discredit my son, Erik, and they haven't been able to come up with much that they think would make a very good case.
Garcia, meantime, says he was compelled to come forward after hearing about the inquest delay. He says it's time people heard his take on how it happened.
Now, Garcia also wants to reiterate he was not looking at Scott when these shots were fired. He only turned immediately afterward, and that's when he saw him fall to the ground. But again, he says both hands were clearly visible.
You are listening to Freedom Radio, where freedom hunters realize freedom.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you. And as you said, you've been following this for some time. You described the event pretty well. It was needless, it was senseless. My wonderful son Erik should still be alive and contributing to the community there, but unfortunately he's not. First off, I'd just like to explain a little more of why we had to drop the lawsuit. Definitely is not anything I wanted to do. We worked for several months with the legal team trying to find another way around. Literally got a second opinion from somebody totally outside the state, and they worked on it for a good solid month, and it all came down to one thing. Even if we won at the local level, and that was a possibility that we felt confident about, but sooner or later Metro would have appealed this, and the appeal would have gone to the Ninth Circuit Court. And that particular court has an almost unbroken record of finding in favor of the cops, even when you've established that excessive use of force was employed. So even though they may agree that, the cops overstepped the line, they still come down in favor of them because of something called qualified immunity. It's a quirk in the law. It's one of those things that we civilians, if you will, just don't know about until you run into it. It was probably put in place by well-meaning lawmakers who, unfortunately, were listening to, who knows, police unions or others that were pitching the idea of law and order. Well, these well-meaning lawmakers said, by God, we want law and order, so let's stick this in there to help protect the cops. Well, here's a perfect case of an unintended consequence because now they're in the business of protecting killer cops, and people like my son will absolutely see no justice through the court system at this point. So I'm sure there's a lot of high-fiving going on around Metro. Publicly, they're saying, "Oh, how sad this is for everybody." No, from day one, they knew this would go to the Ninth Court eventually, and they would win. We didn't realize that. Our lawyers didn't realize this. And the bottom line is we could have won if we had the Costco video. Unfortunately, that video was, I used the term, disappeared. And there were any number of people that actually saw the video and said, we cannot let this get out there. And I'm not casting aspersions on anybody in particular, but I do know, I got information from inside Metro that video was seen. And yet it was suppressed and it was destroyed. So, just a few of the facts right out of the investigation report. It's unbelievable that they actually put all this in there. But I did an analysis. I did a timeline of it, cleared away all the obfuscation, which was intentional, I'm sure. And here's the bottom line. Metro intentionally left that Costco video. It's a DVR, like you have in your home, only an industrial grade one. They left that DVR in Costco's hands for 5 days. With Metro's full knowledge, they allowed Costco personnel and contractors to mess with it. I personally think that the video had been destroyed before the contractors ever got involved. So between the time Erik was killed on Saturday around midday, 1 o'clock, until, the so-called attempts to retrieve the data Monday morning, there's a lot of time in there it's unaccounted for. But the big question is, why didn't Metro seize that video recorder, the cameras, everything else, like they always do? If it was a bank robbery, or anything, but anytime there's a homicide and you've got video data galore, there was something like 24 cameras around the store feeding that one video recorder, including several cameras out in front where Erik was killed. We could very quickly establish, was Erik doing anything wrong inside the store? Through a lot of other testimony, no, he was not doing anything untoward. He was carrying a lethal weapon. Somebody challenged him. Nobody ever asked him to leave. There's news reports out there today that said he was asked to leave. No, he wasn't. They said he refused to leave. No, he didn't. He walked out totally oblivious that the store was being evacuated because of him. He walked right past Officer Mosier. He could have gone all the way into the parking lot except for one little dirt bag that fingered him, the guy that called in the 911. He pointed out to Mosier and said, that's him. Mosier panicked because he was already by him. Erik was already past him. And he started screaming at him. So get this. Timeline is important. Mosier started screaming several conflicting commands. Some say 2, some say 3 conflicting commands. Get your hands up, don't do that, drop it, things like that. In that time, Erik had to stop, turn around, realize that they were hollering at him. Here's a little fat cop with a 45 pointed at Erik. This guy is screaming. A few other little factors. Erik had tanker ears. It's the same as I have airplane ears. I can hear you perfectly fine, Billy, but put you in a crowd and you can talk to me and I may not be able to hear and understand you. It's a phenomenon of being exposed to loud noises over a period of time. I've logged over 2,000 hours in 80 different types of airplanes. My ears have suffered for it. Erik logged a lot of time in M1A1 tanks. And we used to joke, we're great unless we get in a crowd and then we can't hear each other across the table. I know that's the case. Here's another tidbit. At the inquest hearing, there was any number of people that testified that said, I heard the cop screaming something, but I couldn't understand it. There were others that said, I heard the cop screaming and I could hear him loud and clear. I plotted the positions of those different witnesses. Every witness who was under the canopy, the entryway to Costco, so they were the closest to both Mosier and Erik. They couldn't understand what he was saying. Now the witnesses that were outside, out from under the canopy, so they're farther away, they were the ones that said they could understand it. There's some kind of an acoustical phenomenon in that canopy. It just happens to be high enough that I have a feeling it distorts the audio waves. I'm not sure Erik understood what he was being told. To my son's credit, he turned, faced this fat cop screaming at him with a gun. He still had the what I call situational awareness, fighter term, to lift his T-shirt with his left hand. Some people say he announced, I am armed, I am armed. He raised his right arm to expose the gun inside his waistband in the holster. Uh-oh, he had a BlackBerry in his right hand. Mosier fired. All of that happened in 2 seconds. 2 seconds. We know it was 2 seconds because that data is on the the 911 call audio, and at the inquest hearing, one of the detectives testified when we asked, how long was it? He said, 2 seconds. So it's absolutely amazing Erik was even able to respond at all That tells me he was not drug-addled, as they keep putting in the newspaper. You know, Erik, that's kind of another huge factor here, Lily. I've never had a chance to tell all of this. Erik was on heavy-duty painkillers, yes. He had 40% of his L5 vertebra broken off. He broke it off jumping out of airplanes in the Army. It hadn't bothered him for all these years, really. He always had a little back problem. But he didn't know he had that until he was in a little car accident, hit from the side. It realigned the spine, according to the doctors, and all of a sudden, he was suffering from just almost intolerable pain. Early in 2010, he went to several doctors. They said, yeah, we can do surgery, but there's a 50% chance you'll wind up a paraplegic. He told his mom and me, he said, I'm not going that way, you know. And when he finally found a pain management specialist, and pain management is an art. I mean, you know, several of the general practitioners that testified at the inquest hearing, they said, oh, you know, Erik wanted so much, he had to have been addicted, and I said, I can't treat you anymore. That's because they don't understand pain. Erik went to a pain management specialist, and Dr. Noisky got him on 3 pills a day. So Erik was taking prescription medication right to the, you know, right in line with what he was told he could take. I saw him just a matter of weeks before he was killed, and he was happy. He said, Dad, 3 pills a day get me through. I'm level. I don't have the high ups and downs I had when the other doctors were giving me basically not the right stuff. And I could go on and on there. But there's one other factor. The cops and the DA made a huge thing at the inquest hearing. This guy was on potentially lethal levels of painkiller and Xanax. No, he was not. There is no such thing as potentially lethal levels. You look at what that means. It's a DEA established threshold that has nothing to do with reality. So you say, okay, he was on a lot of painkiller. What's the impact of that? First of all, he was on it because he had severe pain. There's another factor. You can look it up. Erik was a redhead. Whatever gives a person the red hair makes him on the order of 94 to 97% in that percentage of the population of redheads that require much more painkillers than the average bear does. I mean, it's out there. It's in the medical journals. One more factor. There's a genetic factor. I have a high pain tolerance. My son Kevin has a high pain tolerance. Kevin said, I can take 1 Vicodin and I don't even feel it. We have a cousin that has exactly the same thing. There's something in our genetic chain that says we can tolerate a lot of pain, but when it's time to take the painkiller, you got to take more than the average bear does. Put all those factors in there, and what does it tell you? Metro was desperate to cover this up. They were desperate to demonize Erik, and you say, why? Well, when I got to Vegas, I was naive enough to say, why would they bother covering it up? This looks like a open and shut case, you know. And everybody looked at me like I was out from another planet, and they said, because they always do. And then what else was going on? There was a critical election year going on. I have a feeling if Erik had been killed in another year, it might have gone differently. Maybe not. But for a variety of political reasons, the blue wall was erected. The cops linked arms. Many good cops lied in order to protect, because they had to protect their own. They had to protect their own jobs. It comes down to, you know, do I go ahead and go along with this? That's the problem. Good cops get polluted because, you know, they have to put food on the table. They got to take care of their families. They don't have any other place to go. And they hear from the other cops, hey, this happens everywhere. So if you go somewhere else, you really think it's going to be any better? Here are the statistics that I've heard from inside Metro. 50% of the cops on Metro are good professional police officers. They're there for the right reasons. They're trying to do the right job every single day. Unfortunately, that does not include leadership. The next 25% down are there because they need a paycheck. So they just kind of coast along. They're the last ones to show up for a call. Kind of keep your head down, get a paycheck. And then 25% are rogue or bad cops, which is way above the average police force. 2 to 4% is what an average large city police force can expect to have rogue cops, and they work diligently to get rid of them. It doesn't happen at Metro as I see it. They condone it. Now, why? I'll throw out one thing and turn it over to you for questions. My opinion, and it is Bill Scott's opinion, is that they could clean this up in a heartbeat, but the PPA stands in the way. The PPA, the Police Protective Association, they're in charge of that department. And that's the union. That's the union. And that's why they're so arrogant and aggressive. I mean the sheriff, if we had a PPA here in Colorado Springs that was acting like the one in Las Vegas is, I guarantee you our sheriff would fire every one of the cops that is saying, I will not participate in any investigation of an officer-involved shooting, and I will not participate or testify at an inquest hearing. And to even remotely say that the inquest as it stands in Las Vegas violates my Fifth Amendment rights, they would be laughed off out of the state here in Colorado. So Las Vegas is a totally different culture, and I think it's going to take an awful lot of work to clean up Metro. Now, if you give me time after your comments, I can give you some suggestions of how it could be cleaned up very quickly. Well, somebody may say this is ridiculous, but I've seen it work before. I guarantee you, if the billionaires that run the Strip, if they did nothing more than call in the leadership of Metro, call in the district attorney, call in the public administrator, set them down and say, you guys are why our economy is in a tank, and you are hurting our bottom line here on the Strip. Now, here's what you're going to do. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to get rid of every one of those killer cops. You're going to start firing these guys that not only kill people, but then refuse to cooperate. The Nevada statutes are there. If it's insubordination, the leadership has the option, has the right to can those guys, to fire them, so they can do that. Now, the next thing they can easily do is call for the county commissioners, the mayor, city council to declare no confidence in first the PPA, the union, and decertify them. That's all they have to do. Just decertify and say, we will not negotiate with this union because they are not representing the best interests of their members. Dirty little secret. The PPA has been losing hundreds of members. Officers are abandoning the PPA in droves because they don't want to be associated with what their leaders are saying. And they do not support this arrogant, in-your-face attitude from the PPA. Many of them are going over and joining the Order of Police Officers. I maintain that you walk up to a police officer and you say, are you a member of the local PPA? If he says yes, consider him in the bottom half of the officers there. The professional police officers in Las Vegas are leaving the PPA and they don't want anything to do with them. So the leadership should decertify them. They've got every right to do that. So tell Chris Collins to go find another job. We don't want you anymore. We will not negotiate with you anymore. It could be done. It could be done easily. And the last thing, and then we'll bail out. In a face-to-face meeting, the billionaires that control the Strip again will inform Metro's leadership that the days of LAM, life after Metro, have ended. No sheriff or senior Metro officer will ever again be hired as a chief of security for a major hotel casino. Chiefs of security for these hotel casinos will be hired only from candidates residing outside the state of Nevada. There you go. So to resurrect the Vegas economy, the big money guys are going to have to take dramatic action to clean up the corrupt culture that I call the cartel of corruption. They helped put it in place years ago. They can clean it up. I guarantee you they can do it in 2012 if they would. And the economy would return.
And I've seen exactly what you're talking about, the corruption. You know, Metro has their own lobbying. They lobby to our legislators in Nevada. So on our dime, they are lobbying to push more laws to give them more probable cause to violate we the people. I mean, it's absolutely astounding what I saw at one of those sessions that I attended.
So why do you think a lot of white-collar people and a lot of blue-collar people are leaving Vegas? The economy sucked, for one thing, but I cannot tell you, Lily, how many people have called me, sent me emails, walked up to me while I was in Vegas, getting out of here just as soon as I can. Now, at least that many or more have made the point of tracking me down to say, I heard about your son's tragedy. We will never, ever again go to Las Vegas. I've got a letter right here. Somebody that said, we were planning to move to Las Vegas to retire. Once we heard about your son's case, we decided we are not going there. Now, the old journalist criteria was, for every letter you get, there's at least 10 more out there that feel the same way.
Thank you so much, and I'll contact you later.
Thanks, Lily.
Okay, have a good one.
You are listening to Freedom Radio, where freedom monsters, freedom is free.